we can get started, I guess. So oops, well, hi. So I'm Jen. I work with the SWS Stanford Web Services team. You can find me at Brees at Stanford or jbrees at stanford.edu or Brees on Twitter. If you type lose that last D on Twitter, you get football guy. So just as forewarning. So hello, I'm happy to be here. So what I want to talk about is I want to talk about visual regression testing and what does that mean? And what is our automated visual regression testing look in 2021? So I'm kind of going to switch a little bit between manual and automated because manual is always going to be a part of our testing. It just because as you're building stuff, you're going to be flipping back between your code editor and your browser to see if you broke anything. At least that's how I work. So I thought we'd start with some definitions. So we made sure that we're all kind of talking about the same thing. And regression testing is used to verify that our changes didn't break the world. And visual regression testing is to make sure it looks like we expect it to. And it happens as a comparison, particularly if you're doing it as automated, which would be ideal because this is difficult to do. And the slide didn't go. Why didn't the slide go? There we go. So then there's visual testing and there's functional testing. Visual testing is, does it look right? And functional testing is, does it behave the way we want it to behave? And I like this idea, which is, testing is going to lead to failure and failure leads to understanding. And I think it's important that nothing is perfect when it comes out of the bat. And I'm not here to say that, oh, well, you didn't do a good job or I didn't do a good job, because that's not conducive to making like good software. We need to find where the holes are because there's things that happen that we don't think about. And this guy's really cool. He's an aerospace engineer and he built the Voyager, which was the first fastest spacecraft. That was the Voyager in '86. And he's done a whole bunch of like really cool stuff. If you are into aerospace, you could go check him out. And so what's the trouble with visual regression testing? Well, it's hard. So what could be our solution? And I think it's automation. And we want to get wider and deeper test coverage for the sites we build. So here are some of the things that I would like in an automated testing framework that's visual, which is it's relatively easy to use. It'll integrate with the stuff we already use. Open source is a plus. We would like low maintenance overhead. And again, it has to meet that goal of increasing our scope for automated testing. And so I've looked at a few testing frameworks, and I'm kind of new to this type of testing. So there's a lot that I don't know. So at the end, I'd like to hear what everybody else is doing and what you guys think and what your experiences have been. So the three that I'm going to talk about is Diffie, which is it's pretty simple to use. It's, it has a web interface. You just log in, you set up your environments and you compare and contrast. And I'll show you some pictures. Jest is really fabulous. It works in your terminal window and it will create the mocks and set everything up. It's really good at testing React components and creating all these mocks and setting it up. And I will show you screenshots of that because nobody does terminal live. That's not a good idea. And then Percy is another one, which is pretty neat. It comes as part of Browser Stack, and Browser Stack bought it. So if you do testing, Browser Stack is neat because you can take, like, for example, say you have a phone application and you want to test, different combinations that you might not actually own the device for. So you could test different combinations for different devices and resolutions and all sorts of things. So it lowers that. It also has a lot of automated things you can do on there too. But that's browser stack. But again, it's easy to use. And so Percy is part of that. So if you have a browser stack account, you probably have a Percy access. Okay, so here are some of the whys that I've been thinking about and kind of trying to compile. So we want to catch our issues early. We'd rather find it than have our client report it to us, because that's just a nicer scenario to be in. It's not a good experience for our users if they have broken CSS or missing images, or if you hit the submit button, nothing happens. And all this would lead to lower support calls, which is, a good thing when we're looking at how much money we're spending. And our websites are more complicated. They're more like little applications. And so there's all these different scenarios or combinations you can get that are harder to test for. We were just trying to fix a bug the other day that indented text in a weird way, and it only indented text when you added these two different paragraph types together in this perfect scenario. And it's like, who would think of that to test it? So then, if you heard Mike talk earlier today, he was talking about, we find these weird things and we add them to our test suite. So we know it's like, oh, that happened, so we should add this to our test suite. We want to improve our quality. And then number 6, so that it's a nice even grid, is because the cool kids do it. And I'm not watching the chat, so if anybody has questions or stuff, someone tell me to slow down. And
nothing in there yet. I'll keep an eye.
Okay, cool, thanks. So this is what I was thinking about, like, what is our ideal development flow for testing and making sure we cover all these things? So over here at the beginning of our little road would be our definition of our project, right? We'd lay out what we're actually going to do. And then the developers will code and test it, and they do this locally. And then we're going to run our automated tests locally. Like, so for example, we use Code Climate, and Code Climate runs and says, oh, it passed. And then we push our code up to GitHub, and then GitHub runs its tests. So it runs it in a complete container environment. And then once we have it up there and it passed those tests, we can hand it over for peer review. And this means that an actual person looks at your code and wanders through and say, oh, hey, maybe you could make this selector less specific so that you can override it here better. So that kind of feedback happens, and it happens in a loop. So you're partnering with your peer review person, and they're looking at code, and then you're pushing code back up, and the tests keep running. So there's this cycle. And then once you guys have made that solid, then you can deploy it and merge it into your code base, into your master branch or whatever, or your main branch, whatever your branch and system is. And once it's up on test, then you're going to go back and forth between your stakeholders, right? Your stakeholders are going to look at it and make sure you delivered what you said you were going to deliver. And then at this point, when it's on test, you can take some of these, you can use like Percy or Diffie on it, and then you can compare your production to your new code. So then when you look at your new code together, you can see if your new code is going to break anything in production. And then you can have some iterations on this. And then once all of these kind of tests and everybody has the thumbs up sign, then you can deploy it to your final environment. And now I have to take a deep breath because I'm talking too fast, sorry. Okay, so now I'm going to show you Percy. So can you guys just tell me that you can see it okay? Okay. So here is a demo project. It's not anything that we've done, but this way you kind of get an idea. So I'm going to go into this area here, which is this feature branch. And so this is our little layout of what everything looks like. Over here under build 2, you can see the things. There's been 9 changed snapshots. Nothing has not been changed, which is kind of interesting. There's changes requested, unreviewed, and the browsers that we're going to look at, and the widths of things. And then over here are the snapshots. In the center well is the comparison. And then the far left is our comments. above at the top is our controls. So you can see we have it, I have it in a dual pane, and I have the visual turn on. So I'll turn it off so you can see what happens. You see where it turned red here over this icon. So first off, there's baseline to master, and then here's our changes. So what you can see happened is they changed this little heartbeat logo from green to yellow. Neat, right? Okay. So now we look over here, what changed? And we got 4 matching changes, and this groups together the error pages because they're all very similar. And you see there's 4 changes here. Okay, the logo changed, neat. I expected that. So doesn't need too much thought on that. And then, oh, look, hey, we've got dashboard changes. This might be surprising. So we'll turn on the visual thing again so you can see the red. So you'll see here, this logo changed all these guys here. Okay, did we expect that? Did we not expect that? I don't know. We can look here and we can see it also did it to the drop-down menus. These logos changed their color. And again, here through the dashboard, you can see where the logos changed their color. So this is interesting. So we can now, we're looking at Chrome on a desktop, so we can switch over to a tablet. We can see what happened to the tablet. And you'll notice it didn't find any changes on these because those drop-down menus are not open. So that's kind of nice because sometimes there's going to be changes on a mobile device that won't be on the desktop and vice versa. And you'd want to be able to catch those. And you can set Percy up so you can put comments, you can feedback, and once feedback is approved, then you could push the code live. This could be one of the tests that has to happen before your code is merged in. And that's part of the setup that you would do. So, and then I have one other change. So this is Diffie. You can see Diffie. And one of the problems with front-end visual testing is you get a lot of false positives. And this is old, but you can see over here in red, everything has changed. And the reason everything has changed is because the content changed. So this is the trick. Like, how do we balance finding real changes and potential real problems like that logo color changing versus, oh, they updated their site and added content. So that's one of the things that you're going to want to keep in mind as you are doing this type of testing. And I don't think I think it had a couple other things we could review, but that kind of gives you the idea of how that works.
And there's a question in the chat from Janice about where do you load the files or the links into Percy?
I haven't, this is just the demo through Percy. So I haven't set up or created a project. So you would go to create a project, you would name it, and then it would index it. Probably very similar to how in Diffie, you would create a project and you could look in the project. I'll show you the project settings here. So this is Diffie, which is the same basic not the same software, but it's very similar from what I looked at. And the page URLs, and what Diffie will do is it'll fetch the URLs for it. You'll feed it a URL string and it'll fetch them for you. And in the environments, you would set up your production environment, and you can also say if it's password protected or not. And you'll set up your staging and your development. So for example, you could have several levels of sites. Does that work? Okay. And okay, so here is another type of testing that we can do. And this is jest, like I was talking about earlier. So here in your package.json, you would add in your testing framework, which is line 18. I don't know if you guys, is this big enough to see it? So basically you add it as part of your package. And then here I had a simple function I made, right? I'm just adding 2 numbers and I'm going to export it. And then my test, which is just sum.test.js, is I'm going to have this sum. The test is add 1 + 2 = 3. Does that work? And then we would expect the sum to be 3. And then when you get over here to your terminal window, you can add that up, and you can see here it passed that test. So this type of testing works really well for React and components when you're kind of separating them out a little bit more. So this is testing the logic that happens to your framework, like your business logic, rather than exactly what it looks like. But Jest also does make some screenshots, so it will do some comparison like that.
Say, Jen, JB Christie has a question for you. JB, do you want to just ask it?
Yeah, sure. Oh, I'm sorry, my video is freezing. I'll turn it off. So you had mentioned, our test failed because they changed the content on the test site. And I'm wondering if there's a way to generate your baseline images immediately before you deploy your changes. So, you get the same content. So that was it.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what you'd want to do. You would want to stage your content and then download everything and make sure you had a good comparison. So for some of the adapt testing that we did is we would make sure we had all the correct content on our test site and then compare test to test or a previous test to an older test. So the question is, or one of the questions that we came up with is, how would we do this without putting it up and breaking it, right? Because you don't want to put it up before you test it. So you would have to have another interim step to testing it. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
So let's see, that's the Jest piece. And then here, so I really wanted this to be kind of a discussion because, like I said, I'm still exploring and learning myself about the best way to do some of these front-end testings. So here are some of the questions that we were thinking of is like, what kind of tools are people using for testing? Does this type of testing make sense in your current scope? I mean, if you only have a 4-page website, then maybe this level of effort doesn't really make a lot of sense. But if you're working on a team of 5 people and everybody's making changes, it does make sense because not everybody knows what everyone else is doing. And where are you guys on your journey for front-end testing? Or and how are you differentiating the different approaches to website testing? So that was kind of what I had to share at the moment, but happy to. I can't figure out how you get to the chat. There it is. Generate new images.
One of the
Right,
things
so,
that I've always found really challenging with visual regression testing is it's always fascinating. And when you run your first visual regression test, whatever the tool is, you look at it and you're like, wow, this could be so powerful. And then you start to really put it into practice and you're like, wow, this is a total pain in the butt. There's so many false positives. And so you can do different things in the different tools where you can mask out different areas, different sections of the page, different CSS classes or IDs. And the thing that's challenging for me, that's always been challenging for me, is the cost to benefit ratio. So I don't know, Jen, what you found or what other people on the call have found. Like, where's that balance of? Because I could easily spend a week on really tweaking the settings, but then at the end of that week, is it a valuable testing tool?
So when we were doing a lot of the testing for rolling out that paragraph variant, we did a lot of testing and it kept finding the same thing. Oh, well, it's testing from test to this other test. So we got an extra carrot, so I think I think it's a kind of a question, like, was it worth it? Some of it was, but I don't have a good answer for that.
I wonder if some of the problems related to, for instance, changing content, right? If you have a test bed installation that only has, a certain fixed amount of default content that very rarely changes, and you use that as the source for your testing URLs rather than, say, the production site, which may be in constant, churn in terms of what the content is. Maybe you could avoid some of those problems just by using, sort of a baseline install as the thing that you are testing rather than an actual running site. Do you think that would be a reasonable strategy?
I think so. We've been talking about doing that with our front end folks in the design team here on SWS, setting up our AMP testing site so that we could really use that as our baseline for testing a particular sub-theme, and then all the modules.
Have you found a tool that enables you to go in, after you do the run and say, because one of the challenges is that you're pushing up a theme change and you're like, yes, I know this is going to change. Have you found anything that allows you to do a list of exclusions and just go in and acknowledge and be like, okay, this thing that it's reporting as an error, we expect this to change. This is fine. That's been, I think, one of our challenges in terms of integrating visual regression testing into our automated testing platform, where we are very strict that 100% of the tests need to pass.
Yeah, so Jest is really good at that, at just isolating a particular piece of it. And that is known well for that. It does really good mocks. It also, like, you can destroy and create them really easily with your script. So Jest is really good for that. I didn't find configuration tools for as easy in some of these other guys.
Just is the one that's CLI based, right? So we could integrate into our Circle CI.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Correct. I'm going to look here real quick and see if I could find a way that we could easily exclude.
We've experimented a little bit with Tugboat as well, and Tugboat will spin up ephemeral environments on pull requests, and we'll actually do some visual regression. I don't know that we've done much with the visual regression testing with Tugboat, but that would be another one that's there. My recollection is that we have to do a lot of very miserly parsing of things on Tugboat in order to fit within the tier that the free tier that we're on.
Mm-hmm. So I was just looking real quick, and Diffie does allow you to mask certain areas. And then I'll check here on Percy. Yeah, Tugboat would come up and down quite a bit. Like, in my experience, you'd spin it up and you would try to send it to the designer, and the designer would say, oh, it doesn't, not there anymore. And you have to do it again. Oh,
A little bit too ephemeral at times.
mm-hmm. Exactly. So I can get back to you about the masking and the different ways that we could try that out, because that would be useful.
Yeah, it's not just it's not just the masking. It's it's almost I want to curate in any given release, right? You can mask I could mask a slideshow because I know that that's going to be dynamic content. However, when I run if we're on 2.1.0 and we're pushing out 2.1.1 and I'm running the tests for the two of them, and I'm like, okay, this one we definitely changed the header or the global footer or whatever, to be able to go in and just tick that for that particular time. That's the one. All right. Eli's saying Laravel Dusk is interesting. Functional testing. It sounds like, Eli, that sounds like it's more like Selenium almost.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's more along those lines. But it's, it depends on your goals. My baseline goal is to have the thing run. It still runs after design change.
Yeah, I think it's a tough problem, and I think it's a many a many-pronged problem, right? So we're going to want our functional testing, like in our code climate and our and maybe our jest, and we want that. And then we also want some of this visual regression testing so that we could go through and scan it really quickly and check it. And then we also, as developers, you know, we test what we build too, because I think it has to be many layers of different things, and stuff that we could off put to being automated is the excellent part. But what part is that? You know, like what if we just ran the automated testing on header and footer and branding? I'm not sure, but like, again, I think it's not just automated. I think it has to be all of the pieces together.
Yeah, and I think that anything that requires a judgment call, it's going to be impossible for us to completely automate. So that's where I think where we are in our maturity of our front end testing is that a lot of it still requires. And I mean, Carol, you know this in terms of doing accessibility testing. When you run an accessibility scanner on something and it pops up with it flags something, you're like, no, when I actually look at that and go through as a user and try to assess it, you know, it's a false positive. So I think that there's a space to be a number of different tools in our tool belt that we can look at certain things, like just with Circle CI to do kind of the evaluation, the evaluative testing that you demonstrated, and then the visual regression testing, just alert developers rather than be a complete blocker for having code get merged in, just so that it's like, okay, let's let the robots scan this and look at it, alert the developers and have them look at it and see whether or not this is something that we need to halt the presses, stop the presses for.
Yeah, there was in one of the tests that we were looking at, there was a test that was interesting because it showed that was the color one. It's this one. When they made this change, they lost this already have an account sign in. So this is the kind of stuff that would be nice to find in your visual regression testing, I think. You know, that you lose some actual functionality in what you were doing.
It actually seems a lot like you just have to be really mindful when you run about your content beforehand, because you could refresh the site, take a snapshot, and then update it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if we change the process like that rather than just use last time's snapshot,
Mm-hmm.
then it would, that would save a lot.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think it has to be a very mindful process that we, kind of add into whatever else we're doing for our testing. I do think it's important to do in some fashion. Let's see. So that's kind of what I had to share and to show.
I was unfortunately late. Can you just do it all over again?
I'll give you the slides.
No, this is good. Thank you.
Sorry, I probably talked too fast. Well, for next time. I'll do better next time.
Well, Jen, if you don't mind, I want to go back to the point where you talked about the different combinations and how you start to see how particular some of the bugs may be. And if you want to talk about how we've experienced that in Stanford sites and during our QA, I think this is where visual regression comes in really handy to catch those complexities and to see how things are dependent, even though we may have not thought they were dependent.
Right. I think that comes too from like people using it. Like the one that Dina found, which was the having two different paragraph types together, is what caused that weird indent on the news headline, because in the vertical CSS file, in the news file, so it had to be a news item that was a vertical card, with another paragraph. And in that CSS file, there was a setting that was a article, and then it went down to an H2. So that had more specificity than what was in the other file. So it moved it over. But it had to be that particular combination. So those are the ones that are kind of tricky to find, I think.
Yeah, and that brought me to the point of when we use consistent elements like buttons, and then we use it in one specific location, and we forget that, oh no, buttons have this specific way of displaying, and in this area, it's going to look off. And we're like, oh, is this going to be an exception to the rule, or are we going to have to do something different?
Right. It's, yeah, it's an interesting problem, right? Because we're sharing all this content and all these little different pieces all over the website. And we're trying to balance how specific our CSS is. But we want them to all commingle, but we want them to look a little bit different, each of these different things. And it's definitely something I've been trying to figure out and get to be a little more seamless, but it's definitely been, as we've added complexity, it's been getting harder to test.
And I think kind of what we came across is once we find these, we can't find all these problems. You know, we can't come up with every combination of components next to each other and see how they're going to behave at all browser widths on all browsers. I think what's important is that we do capture the ones we do and make sure they don't happen again.
And I think it's also important that the CSS that we write is less specific, because that also has shown to cause less breaking. And so as I'm seeing stuff that is very specific, I'm trying to make it less specific. Again, like using that article and H2 combination, for example.
Somebody had never done this before and was just getting started on, say, a medium-sized site. What's the startup cost? What's the investment to get this set up somehow?
I haven't actually paid for these accounts, so I'm not exactly sure. Oh, go ahead, Carol.
If you're using Diffie,
yeah.
If you're using Diffie, it's pretty quick. I forget what it costs, but you just type in the URL, you scan it, and then you scan it again against something else. You can find where things are going to be, you're going to get false positives, like different, like on the events where they keep changing. You just don't even want to look at that because it's going to be false. Chances are it's going to be false positive anyway. So you take a little bit of time, put the CSS in there to mask it. I've been tickled with how quickly you can get Diffie up and running.
I would say less than half a day. I've iterated on this a number of times over the last decade, probably, and like tried a number of different tools, and something like Diffie. And what was the one, Shay, that was Diffie's predecessor?
Backtrack.io.
Backtrack. Keep thinking backstop, backdrop. It's one of those back things. Yeah, I would say, JB, like in a half a day, you could at least get some return on investment and just get something set up and at least be able to look at things if you've got, a dev and a prod, or let's say a prod and a non-prod environment.
That's cool. Do these things, do they spider your site? Or do you give them a sitemap and specific pages to look at?
I think it just spiders it. You just put in the URL and you say, go fetch.
I think you can limit the crawl depth. The different ones I think are going to have a little bit different functionality, but you can either feed it a static. So that was what Backtrack was. Backtrack would either crawl and generate the list of URLs, or you could just say, these are the URLs. And with Backtrack, which is now Diffie, I would just feed it you know, the 5 top level menu items and the homepage and the 5 top level menu items. Just pop them in there.
When I was talking to Mike yesterday, he was suggesting backstop.js too, to check that one out. I have not read up on that one, but that's another visual regression for web apps. If you wanted something like that, JB.
Thank you.
You throw in one more option in there. An older version is another library called Wraith, developed by the BBC. So it's got a little bit more of a command line type of approach to it. So maybe not as full features as some of these other ones, but if you're looking at scripting stuff, that might be an option.
What's the name of that? Oh, Race. Okay.
Wraith, yeah, WRAITH.
I was looking for the URL and I can put it in the chat. So there it is, Eli, in the chat.
Thanks. Yeah, apparently it's not the movie Wraith.
No, it's not a ring wraith either. Which is the first thing that comes up when you search for it.
You get to feel pretty cool when you're using it.
Yeah, John's got experience with that as well.
Mhm. Let's see. Oh, right there, there's the SWS race test.
Doesn't look like it's been updated in a while, so
Yeah,
maybe
maybe
it's a bit more obsolete.
Possibly could be. I
Yeah.
think I first started poking at that in around 2014. So, and that GitHub repo that I posted hasn't had a commit in almost 2 years. So.
Yeah, June 26th, just looking at that. So maybe not that one.
Yeah, there's lots of interesting resources out there looking for how do we test our stuff.
Well, Jen, thank you so much. I apologize for being late. The other session lasted late, and so
It's okay.
I clicked on the wrong link. But thank you so much. This is a really good presentation. It's a really good things to think about and discuss. I appreciate you leaving room at the end actually for some discussion. That's really nice.
Thanks. I'm glad you guys all came and everybody was engaged, and like how do we like as university folks and the other folks who are here, how do we make our stuff better? That's we make it better for our users and make it better for our developers. So we're not, chasing bugs that are really hard to find or really easy to find, but they take a lot of time. So
Developers are people too.
yes, see. So thank you guys. I appreciate it.
A little plug at 3 o'clock, we're going to have a little social hour if everybody wants to come join in. Just hang out on the community room channel. And if you bookmark the community room channel from yesterday, it changed because we were having Zoom problems and we think it was too many sessions under one person's name, so we had to change it. So make sure you get the new Zoom link. So, well, thank you, Jen. Everybody want to unmute so to give her a round of thank you.
Great job.
Yeah.